Rambam discusses this in his Perush on the Mishnah, Masechet Avot. We have this Mishnah here, the beginning, the first perek of Masechet Avot, Shemaya v'av talyon qibbalu mehem. Shemaya omer, ahov et hamelacha. Do not be averse to doing work, to have a job, even if it's not considered a very high status job, because it is the right thing to do. It's the proper, responsible thing to do. As it says in the Talmud, Rav Kahana says, do not reject any kind of work, even if it's the most lowly type, such as flaying the skin of an animal in the shuk. It's important, but it's not the most pleasant job, and it's generally not one who does so is not considered to be a very high status person usually. But if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. That's a hovet hamelacha. U'seno et harabanut, or sna et harabanut, and do not seek power for yourself. That's what it means. Rambam writes about this, about seeking power, and today you could definitely connect this to politics, being a politician, seeking power for yourself. In general, it's a very interesting thing when you think about it. What kind of people should human beings want as the leaders of their society, or the people who wield power? Should it be the people who obviously have a lust for power, for naked power, or it should be quite the opposite, the people who want nothing to do with such things? As Rambam and Chazal say, with regards to Minui Dayanim, choosing judges, a hot topic today in Israel. The right people to be chosen as judges are those who do not wish to be judges, who say, why are you coming to me? There are many other people who are better, more qualified, more appropriate. I'm not worthy, and thank you very much, but no. That's precisely the person you want to make into a dayan. And that's the same is true of political leadership. It has to be the person who has all the right qualities, but really is not seeking such a thing. Rambam writes in his Perush on the Mishnah, when a person seeks Sarara means power, political power, administrative power. Yavru alo nisyonoth ba'olam u'mathavim chashim. This will inevitably, inexorably lead him into many situations, constantly, of tremendous difficulties and challenges, and he will find himself attacked, and he will find himself maligned, and rumors will be spread about him, as we spoke about a moment ago. We all know that those who take upon themselves public office are running this risk, and it's not really something that a rational person would seek for themselves. The reason for this is because if you're in that situation, having to do with power, politics, and all the in those realities, in those contexts, the more base and negative aspects of human nature come to the fore as a rule, and therefore you will find yourself being jealous of certain people, or why did he get that position? I should have got it. And he will have to fight his opponents, because if you're in that position, you will always have opponents. There'll be factions. infighting, and often the infighting and the political rivalry gets out of hand, as we all know, as we see in many countries all the time, basically. We see it at the present moment in Israel as well. And this also means that he will have almost no time, and no time, no inclination, no ability to lead a spiritual existence.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I was thinking that the concept that a leader, a politician should not, that a person should not be seeking to be a leader in politics is exactly the problem we see with what's been happening in Israel, that when you have someone whose main goal is to continue to remain in power, he ends up not willing to do those things that could naturally lead to a situation where he does not continue to hold power, such as doing what he has to do regarding our enemies or certain parts of the land of Israel, doing what needs to be done in a forthright manner, because there's the fear that if he would do so, that, well, that might be considered too extreme, and then somehow he'd be prevented from regaining office. He wouldn't be able to get the same consensus, or he'd be condemned by forces in outside of Israel, and maybe he wouldn't be able to travel outside of Israel. What we need, like you're saying, is somebody whose goal is to get something done, even if it means that he won't be able to remain in power.
All that you say is very true. But more than being an indictment of the individual politician or leader who finds himself in that position, is really more of an indictment of the political system, not just in Israel, but in most countries. It is much more correct to have a system whereby you have stable leadership over the long term, which is not up for debate, and does not need to constantly be considering re-election, because these facts, these realities, as you suggest correctly, hamper, if not more than hamper, they make it almost impossible to do that which needs to be done. That's a lengthy discussion, which we'll leave for another time. What we wanted to look at here in this Mishnah was the third statement of the Mishnah, which means avoid becoming close to the authorities. We see this also very clearly in general, throughout the world, throughout history. Rambam here, for example, says in his Perush on the Mishnah, being familiar with, close to the king, it is it leads you into all kinds of terrible, difficult situations, and again, it is almost always will result in have a negative impact on your spiritual existence and life, your ability to focus on the more sublime and the more serious and more desirable things in life. Because if a person is in that situation, then he is driven constantly to try and be as close as he can to the leader, to the person, the power broker, the king, the president, the prime minister, whatever it might be. That you become caught up in this web and this rat race, where all limitations exist no more. In other words, that people then function and act in ways which are unbridled. And Rambam mentions here, he's talking about this, what we just mentioned before, with Do'er, who, because he wanted to be close to Shaul and wanted to gain favor in his eyes, that's why he related what happened in the city of Nov, and this led to the massacre of the Kohanim of Nov, etc. Why did he do this? Because he was trying to advance himself politically, precisely for that reason, as Rambam points out here in his Pirush on the Mishnah. So this is something that we must be aware of. That doesn't mean that we can suggest that there should be a world or a Jewish society without leadership, without political leadership. There has to be, but it has to be a very different system. The Torah system is a very different system from what we see today, all over the world and in Israel specifically. And there's really no hope for this kind of system anywhere, certainly not in Israel, for many reasons. Because the basic assumption of what is generally referred to as Western democracy, as the concept has developed and evolved, and as it has become understood over the centuries, the basic assumption is that on the central questions of life, the most serious issues, which pertain to philosophy, religion, ethics, what should the essential values and standards of society be? You have different opinions. If it's open for debate, then you're going to find many different opinions. If there's no standard, if there's no authority which lays down the law and the value system, then it's every man to himself, for himself. Then every individual will do as he sees fit. And the basic assumption of the Western democratic system, and which they've turned into an ideal, is that there are no moral guidelines, really. The most basic concept is that you can do whatever you like unless you harm somebody else. And that's with exception, of course, to an unborn child, in which case you can do as you please because it suits you, for example, or many other things that we could mention, but we won't right now. So by abdicating all responsibility and authority when it comes to such matters to the masses, who are the least capable of knowing or deciding any such thing, and you end up with a desert, spiritually, intellectually, philosophically, morally speaking. You end up with a human desert, and that is the worst possible outcome. And the Torah does not believe in such a system. The Torah promotes and describes a reality, a situation where society is run according to the values and precepts and concepts of the Torah. And that is unassailable. That is a given. That is how it should be, and that is how it was in all over the world in non-Jewish society as well for thousands of years. Yes, it's true that there were all kinds of immoral and pagan and violent societies, and very often it was the people in charge were simply those who were more adept and creative when it came to doing away with their enemies in the most violent way, those who were able to somehow impose their will on others. Yes, that's absolutely true. And the same thing is true, by the way, today, because even that which has been the assumption that you can have a democratic society where everything goes by the will of the majority, this has been completely subverted and corrupted in the modern age. As a very perceptive individual once said to me, the assumption of, shall we say, the American concept of democracy. The assumption was, at that time, talking about the second half of the 18th century, Lim, your average American was a farmer. And in one back pocket of his overalls, he had a pocket edition of Shakespeare. In the other back pocket of his overalls, he had a small pocket edition of the Bible. And when he went out to work in the morning, he took a break at some point to eat something. He would read from his Shakespeare. And in the evening, when he came home, after dinner, he would, by candlelight, he would read from his Bible. The point being that such a person had some moral compass. He had some basic ideas. He also had, perhaps occasionally he would see a newspaper, especially if he lived in a more rural area, that might be more not a daily occurrence. But he could hear news, he would hear things, he would hear about different policies and ideas, but he had some basic he had fundamental concepts and assumptions with which he worked, through which he viewed the world. And in the light of that basic moral compass and those essential ideas and notions, he could judge. That was the idea. He should be able to judge the correctness, the veracity, of a person's ideas or claims or suggested policies. He should be able to judge whether such a policy is reasonable, rational, likely to succeed, etc. Or he could also judge, because he has this underpinning through which he sees the world, he could also judge something to be wrong and incorrect and something which needs to be rejected. And journalism at that time tended to play a positive role because it informed the public, the citizenry, of what was going on and what the politicians were doing and what they were suggesting. But today we live, for a long time, we live in a reality where most of the media is corporate media. And yeah, and therefore, like any corporation, it has interests. So if it just so happens to be the case that there are the owners of a particular corporate media outlet, if the owners of a particular media outlet happen to also have a major interest in the sales of product, then you would be naive to assume that they will they will report to you and speak to you honestly, forthrightly, and comprehensively, and tell you not just part of the truth, but all of the truth. That was not the world in which, for instance, American democracy was conceived, but that is the world in which we live today. So essentially, democracy is a sad joke nowadays, because almost any result can be achieved by media manipulation, and if not by media manipulation, then by weaponizing the legal system against your opponents. And this, this of course, these campaigns are led by the media, through the media, for the people who own that media, who have widespread and disparate interests in the economy, etc., etc. So even the theory of democracy is a non-Torah idea, and essentially an anti-Torah idea, because the people are not the sovereign. Hashem is the sovereign, as it says in Sefer Shmuel. Shmuel says to the people, "You want a king, but Hashem is your king. You want the king to decide what's right and wrong. Well, he can't decide what's right and wrong, because Hashem has already decided, and there's only Hashem can decide what's right and wrong." And that was the problem with what they were asking for. They were asking for a king in the sense that he would be able to make the rules, not necessarily in accordance with the Torah. And that's an anti-Torah concept. So not only is the theory of what's called democracy non-Torah in essence, anti-Torah in essence, even more so the reality of what's called democracy, which is all a game, it's all theater. It's all almost nothing you see or hear in the mainstream media can be taken at face value. Everything, in fact, you would be well advised to ignore almost all mainstream media and then be very, very selective and based on information and understanding and what other people can help you understand about where to find real information. You would be well advised to ignore most of what you hear on the news or most newspapers, most media outlets, because it's all engineered. It's all designed to achieve a certain purpose, and it's nothing to do with informing you or helping you understand the world at all. So in that reality, you cannot rely on the citizenry, because they are bamboozled. They are misled. They are being played, and therefore there is no democracy. There are only the big corporate interests, the big power players, who can, because of their immense wealth, they can control everything. Only a fool would think that the world does not work that way when the facts are there before us. And we know this is how things work. And this was always, by the way, the position of the Torah. We see in the Mishnah that we just saw now, do not, normally the Rashuth, the authorities, the government, the king, whatever it is, are not upright, moral people who are doing what they're doing for the right reasons. That's usually not the case, and therefore do not trust them. Do not avoid being known by them, even if possible. Is the world supposed to be that way? No, but often, generally, in fact, it is. Only in an ideal society run according to the Torah could things be different, and we are not at that point yet by any stretch of the imagination. So therefore, the position of the Torah, of the Chachamim, was always stay away from these things and don't believe these people. But they are always interested in achieving something which they're interested in achieving for their own purposes, whether it's a personal financial gain or whether it's some ideological agenda. So the Rambam says, when you see an evil person doing what seems to be a positive action, you should go out of your way to understand and convince yourself that what they're doing is for nefarious reasons, these people are not philanthropists. All this is connected to what we discussed now about Tithwa Dala Rashuth, and we'll leave it there for today.
Rob, it's interesting what you pointed out about American democracy in the past, but I thought it was also interesting the fact that America was much less democratic, and when the founders set up the Constitution, they intended, as an example, for senators to not be elected by the general population, and for the electors to kind of serve as a check on the will of the people instead of just following blindly. They realized the pitfalls of just listening to the mob.
Right. Yes, that is true. That is very true. What this leads to is a perilous cheapening of politics, of a lowering of the standards, type of people who can in fact occupy such positions and take upon themselves public office. The kind of people who become journalists, the kind of people who can influence people. Anyone today with a microphone can make a video, and often they will become they'll have a great following for all the wrong reasons. Of course, it's not always the case, but there is no filter, there is no standard. So yes, we live in a world that is basically derailed. It's a huge train accident, and to get things back on the rails, as we know with train accidents, is a great challenge. So, Heyu Beruchim, Hezku V'yames Levavchem Kol HaMeyahalim L'Adonai. Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.